Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 investors, and welcome to the Monday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name, of course, is Daniel Brooks Kline. I'm the host of the program. I will just say for me, it is T-minus 4 days to my first time back on a cruise ship in 16 months, something like that, a year ago, February, for the Super Bowl. I'm being joined today by Maxx Chatsko. Max, I want to talk about a couple of things at the top of the show. First, we were talking about dental work before the show, and when you get a tooth implanted, I asked the question, do you get the option like a spy to have that, little pack put in? So if you're captured, you can opt, to off yourself so you don't, get tortured to reveal the secrets. That's not my question. My question is, why do we not have more accidentally dead spies? It seems to me like you'd have that in your mouth. Like I bite my tongue all the time. It feels like I wouldn't go a week without accidentally biting my anti-capture pill or whatever you call it there.
Well, Dan, that's why they're spies and you're not. It's pretty simple.
That probably makes sense. Max, did you have fun this weekend? I had fun at the end of the week last week. I went to Hollywood Studios, so it was kind of a working / exercisey weekend for me. Did you get to do something fun?
I did. I went out with some friends. I'm really enjoying everyone being vaccinated and just having fun again. Like last summer was kind of brutal, You're way more social than me, and I'm sure it was painful for you, Dan.
Yeah, it's. I don't even like to think about it because, as you know, I am someone that likes to be in front of people. I spent a lot of my time traveling. I would visit the office back when I worked someplace that had an office, which was not a requirement of my job, but I liked doing podcasts in person. I liked scheduling 12 different coffees a day, and sometimes the coffee was so good I would drink 8 or 9 different coffees a day, which is something I no longer do. That being said, I want to ask a question about vaccines. You brought up people are vaccinated. I think you should take a little bit of a victory lap here because you have been the first person I've seen very publicly in media saying we will almost certainly not need a booster shot anytime soon. And right now you're seeing more and more doctors say that. You're seeing more and more tests show that we're likely to have years of immunity. And the only people calling for booster shots are the CEOs of companies that make vaccines. This is a little bit like the CEO of McDonald's coming out and saying, if you don't have a Big Mac a week, you're going to die. So, and it's probably the opposite. But Max, your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, early on, the focus initially in the media, maybe around, the general population was on antibodies, right? Do you have antibodies? Before the vaccines came out, everybody was focused on, do you have antibodies? If you're infected, how long do they last? And the thing with, if you get infected with the virus or you get the vaccine, antibodies are only part of your immunity. So, B cells are more important. T cells, certain types of T cells are more important. And it stood to reason that, even though we couldn't detect antibodies in your blood to neutralize virus particles, you would still have, B cell memory and T cell memory. So like years from now, if you get sick with something similar, that would ramp back up and you'd produce antibodies again. So, when, like you said, when CEOs are talking about we need boosters and they're already investing in new facilities and I think Moderna even has already a contract with the U.S. government. I hope it's optional so we're not wasting more money. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. If you don't need it, then why should we be paying for it?
I pity the fool who don't have T cells, to take us back to the 80s a little bit there. That is not our main topic for the show today. Our main topic was going to be investing in the recovery. We're absolutely going to talk investing in the recovery. But Max, the internet is a kablooey. All of Twitter is filled up with talk about CRISPR. And by the way, it is very weird to see people who don't have any sort of medical background talking about CRISPR and how much money they're making. But we did actually have some monumental news over the weekend. Can you put it into perspective? And maybe the word monumental is too big a reach, but can you give us some perspective on what we saw this weekend?
Yeah, so we actually talked about this on Wednesday's show, I think it was. So we kind of set it up, right? We knew that on Saturday there would be a data readout. This is the first time we have data from a CRISPR gene editing tool that's been used inside of the body. So the company Intellia Therapeutics, as everyone in the world now knows, released data over the weekend, and the first 6 patients in a rare disease called HATTR. So this was a CRISPR gene editing knockout, meaning they were trying to silence a certain gene, right? So in this disease, a protein called TTR misfolds, it's mutated, and it accumulates in certain organs in the body, and it causes disease. It can be fatal if it's not treated. So their idea is, hey, we'll just knock out this gene so you'll never make that protein. So in the first 6 patients that were tested, and this is an ongoing phase 1 clinical trial, so it's still very, very early, but it appeared to work very, very well. In the lowest dose tested, we saw the average protein reduction was about 53%. So that's not optimal. That's not even better than treatments on the market today. But in the middle dose tested, those 3 patients saw an average protein reduction of about 87%. So that's very competitive with what's on the market today. And then there's a higher dose they want to test because they didn't see any worrisome safety issues from those first 2 doses. So they're going to test an even higher dose and see if we can get even higher levels of protein reduction.
So we welcome your questions and comments. We appreciate the comments that have come in. A few of them are a little off color, so we are not going to share them, but we do appreciate them. We would love, say hello. Ask us a question about Intellia Therapeutics. Ask us about CRISPR. I'm not going to answer those questions. Max will. So Max, testing on 6 people. How far from testing on 6 people to clinical trials, or is this even treating something that's broad enough that you're going to be able to have all those steps?
Yeah, so I think, right, this is still very early. We have to say that, right? But this is also different from other therapeutic modalities, you know? If I give you a pill for like asthma or cancer or something, and it's an oral medication, it's a small molecule, and it's relatively sloppy. It's not very precise. So that's why we have to test it in like hundreds of patients before you have a good idea of, is this safe? Is this effective? How safe? But with genetic medicines, they're a lot cleaner. They're a lot more precise. We're going as far upstream as we can. You know, we're treating the root causes of diseases. So this was a pretty big data readout because, again, it's the first time we have this for inside the body for a CRISPR tool. And the platform that Intellia Therapeutics has for knockouts, it's one of its 3 pipelines. You know, there's no reason to think that this won't work for other genes that we might want to target within the liver. So the market's rightfully excited to assign higher probabilities of success for the company's drug candidates. And that's how we value, early stage drug developers. We don't have revenue. We don't have earnings. We don't have cash flow. So the net present value calculations look at trying to estimate what's the probability this reaches the market and generates some money. So these enormous increases, all 6 publicly traded CRISPR stocks are up about 10% or so. Some have fallen a little bit below that, but it's like everyone's really excited about CRISPR because we're saying, oh, this is going to work like gangbusters, right? So again, it's like tempting to think, well, this is only 6 patients. We have to be careful. And we do, but we have to ask different questions than traditional drug development. So we need to look at, longer term safety issues. The thing with CRISPR that's great, or any gene editing modality, is that it's, one and done. We give it to you once, we've edited the genome, and that's it. Get out of my office, right? But if something goes wrong later, well, there's no undo button. We can't stop treatment. You've already been treated. So these long tail safety risks are something that might, catch up later to CRISPR, something that investors have to keep in mind. So it's tough. This is a totally new territory. We have to value these things properly. But if something goes wrong later, it's going to be really hard for them to come back from that.
So Max, are we more likely to see this technology used to treat things that are deadly or seriously debilitating? Because in theory, if you have a cancer that's going to kill you in the next 18 months, you're not that concerned about whether 10 years from now your eyes are going to fall out. They might be able to find a treatment for that in the interim. Is this technology maybe going to first be used in just preservation of life to help you limp along to the next day?
Yeah, so it's important to point out the limitations of what we're doing now. So this data was for a CRISPR knockout in the liver. So we can't target other organs yet. And you want to do things that are way more precise than a knockout. A knockout's relatively sloppy. So we will use it in other diseases and other organ systems to silence gene expression in other parts of the body, or to alter gene expression, I should say. So yeah, I mean, it's going to make its way into more prevalent diseases, and all genetic medicines will. So like today we're treating rare diseases. Sometimes there's only tens of thousands of patients or fewer globally, or in the US that have these diseases. But eventually we're going to start treating things like, cardiovascular risk reduction, or alcohol use disorder, which is alcoholism, other things that are way more prevalent. Certain types of cancers could eventually be used directly, with CRISPR, RNAi, or something like that. So yes, you're right, but it's still like ways away right now, Dan.
Are we talking years? Are we talking decades?
sometime this decade, we should start to see those enter clinical trials. I don't know, again, the success rates of those, but again, and if we could just talk about maybe the long tail risks a little bit, because
Yeah,
I think
that was going to be my next question. Investors are kind of getting ahead of themselves here. That doesn't mean these aren't good stocks to own, but there's long tail risks, and you're not going to see actual revenue for quite a while, right?
Yeah, so there's a couple different risks. One is commercial risks. So there are treatments available for a lot of these things for gene silencing. And that comes from RNAi. They might not always be better, but they do offer very similar benefits to patients. The caveat is you have to take them more than once, right? But they're simple shots, so subcutaneous dosing. And they're working on spacing out the dosing more than current treatments. So right now, everyone's comparing what the Intellia drug candidate, NTLA-2001, which was the thing over the weekend that had data, to a treatment called Onpatro. And this is, you have to get an IV every 3 weeks. It's very inconvenient for patients. But there's actually another RNAi treatment in development. It's actually probably going to get approved in April 2022 or sooner. It's called vutrisiran. And that's a simple shot, and you get it once every 3 months. And that company is actually looking at maybe dosing it once every 6 months, and then has a newer technology platform. That's not going to enter clinical trials until the end of 2022, but it might be a simple shot once every 12 months. So that kind of starts to look very convenient for patients, right? And if there are long-term safety risks from permanent edits to the genome, then maybe that simple shot, that's reversible treatment, starts to look a little bit more attractive. Now, if we're looking at the long-term safety risks or the long tail safety risks, so that's just the way that CRISPR works, right? Everyone's familiar with like DNA, right? A double-stranded helix, right? Everybody knows the shape. So the two strands wrap around each other. Now, CRISPR gene editing works by cutting both strands of DNA. So we call that a double-stranded break. So we get in and it can precisely target a gene on the genome. So when we say it's precise, that's what we mean. We can precisely target that. However, we rely on natural repair mechanisms to stitch the genome back together. If we cut your genome in half, Dan, that's not very good. You're not going to make it very far. So a double-stranded break is actually one of the most traumatic events in biology, and that's where some of the long-tail risks come in. So we've already observed in the lab that using CRISPR gene editing and then waiting on those natural repair mechanisms to come in and stitch the genome back together, we've observed that there's random insertions of genetic material, random deletions of genetic material, and also something called chromosomal translocations, which is larger parts of your genome are just kind of randomly swapped in and out for one another. Each three of those things, insertions, deletions, and translocations, are all hallmarks of cancer. So, there's this long tail safety risk that, yes, initially the data look great, and in clinical trials, these looks amazing. It's one and done. But maybe years later, maybe even after clinical testing's done or after these things are already on the market, a higher number of patients start to develop cancers because they were treated with CRISPR gene editing. So there's this long-term risk, and there's nothing that CRISPR gene editing can do to fix that. It works by making a double-stranded cut. So if that becomes a problem, then this therapeutic modality is kind of dead in the water. So that's why there's a little bit more excitement for things like CRISPR base editing. It doesn't use a double-stranded break. And there's other gene editing systems that don't rely on double-stranded breaks. So there's a lot more nuance to this. It's not like, CRISPR is going to, cure all the diseases and we never have to develop another medicine again. So we do have to be careful. But at the same time, you can see why there's excitement and why there's a steep adjustment higher to a lot of these market valuations. It does make sense. It's also early. So you have to kind of acknowledge both things.
Chromosomal translocation is on my list of fantasy football team names. That is absolutely going on the list. Max, let's have the last word here. When you invest in a stock like this, there is significantly more risk than when you invest in an established stock. Yes, like tomorrow I'll pick a random company, Target CEO could come out and say something terrifically bad, and that could really hurt the company, but you can fire him and move on and it's going to be fine. This could end up having some of these companies fail, some of this technology fail, or alternate paths be developed that make this type of, I don't want to say risk, but right now experimental technology might make less sense. So as an investor, how do you look at this?
Yeah, well, this is kind of new territory. I think what we can say is a lot of, genetic medicine therapeutic modalities, right? They do seem to have very high probabilities of success. So we can design them to be pretty simple and rationally design them to work. And then when we observe that they work in the body, we know we can translate that to other diseases. So I like, this is new territory, and it requires new thinking, new models, new questions to be asked. So yeah, I don't know. It's
beware the person selling you a CRISPR gene editing kit on Facebook. That is something to be careful of. I want to take the comment from Chris B. It's going to be a good way to seg into a little bit of a promo here. As a healthy skeptic, what proof or milestone would it take for you, that would be Max, to recommend a CRISPR company for Seven Investing? Now, if you are a member of Seven Investing, you would know whether Max has ever recommended a CRISPR company. Has he? Maybe he has. Maybe he hasn't. It is hard to know because you're not a member. You don't have access to our picks. If you would like access to our picks, up until July 7th, that is perilously close to now, less than 2 weeks away, you can join Seven Investing for $17 a month or $170 a year. If you do that before July 7th, I'm saying it in the be wary voice because it changes on July 8th. If you do that, you lock in that pricing forever, as long as you continually stay a member. If you wait till July 8th, our prices are going to go up to $49 a month or $399 a year. Why? Because our service is worth more than that. We've expanded exponentially. We've gone from a handful of advisors to 7 advisors. We've added our member-only calls, which is a 90-minute Ask Us Anything about our picks. We do a new member onboarding call. I did a one-on-one call with a member this week because after exhausting all of those options, he still had some questions about the market. We are a high-service company. We don't promise to do that with everyone. But there are cases where that makes sense, where a person has really put in their work and still has the questions. So if you'd like to become a member, join us at 7investing.com/subscribe. Max, we're going to pivot a little bit here. We're going to play what I call a bit of a game. I'm going to throw out a bunch of sectors / investable areas, and we're going to discuss how we think those areas will do as the country slowly puts the pandemic behind it. It is very strange that we're like sort of post-pandemic. Like I mentioned at the top, I'm going on a cruise this week. But I don't legally have to show I'm vaccinated. But if I don't show I'm vaccinated, I can't go to the casino. I can't go to the piano bar or the pub, 2 of my favorite places on board. There's all sorts of rules. And this is sort of in the endless battle with the state of Florida because they would like to actually be able to require it. But you don't know every place you go. I have the mask in my pocket or in my hand because some places are still requiring it. It is confusing, but the world is opening up. So let's look first. Airlines. Now, airlines are really weird. Have you tried to book a flight anytime recently, Max?
No, not yet, but.
So I have a flight to North Carolina in a couple of weeks and then to Birmingham, Alabama for a wedding. And my flights have been changed like 15 times. My connecting city is changed. And it's because the airlines are dealing with capacity things. But as an investor, and I know this isn't your space, do you think travel goes back to normal and airlines will get back to growth at some point?
Man, I know nothing about airlines as far as the businesses, but I do think there's gonna be a healthy bump this year, right? There's a lot of like pent up demand. People want to get out. Maybe by 2022, it starts to go back to normal, but I don't see any reason why like travel will be permanently dented. I think people are still going to go on vacations and fly around the country and all that.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. It's largely same as it ever was, but it's going to be reported as an increase this year. Why is it going to be reported as an increase? Is every airline except Southwest, or every major airline except Southwest, laid off or furloughed workers. And even in the case of Southwest, they I don't want to say encouraged early retirements, but they certainly worked with their union to get some people who wanted to retire early to retire early. There is a shortage of personnel. There is a shortage of planes. So in a lot of cases, routes I used to fly regularly just aren't there. So you're not going to have trouble getting from LaGuardia to Orlando. But I'm having a lot of trouble getting from West Palm or Fort Lauderdale to Charlotte and Birmingham and home and all the different things, to the point that at some point I was like, how long a drive is this? Like, I know it's about 10 hours to North Carolina, and then Birmingham's about 5 hours from there, but then the ride home would be pretty brutal. So yeah, and I think everything we said there, these weren't investable in my opinion before the pandemic. Some people will make a case for Southwest. I like Southwest as a business. I don't like the endless cycle of investment. I don't like that fuel prices are very volatile and part of their business. I don't like that there's a lot of low-cost competitors coming in. And I think everything I just said about airlines largely applies to hotels. We are going to see a big bounce back in the hotel space because some hotels are still closed. I was just at Disney World, and I don't know the number, but like half the Disney properties, including some very major ones, are still closed. They used a lot of this time, to go back and revamp some hotels, to retheme some hotels, to do some work that's very hard to do when you're at capacity. But Max, I know you've been in some bars and restaurants in recent months, and there's obviously a fair amount of public companies in the restaurant space. I'll give you one that I like as a business, but not as an investment, and that would be BJ's, the restaurant chain. They're sort of, in my opinion, the best of the Chili's, Fridays, Applebee's, all of which are part of publicly traded companies. That being said, I see demand coming back. I see it as high. I think you've got to be best in class in restaurants to be investable, and that is a very short list. You could give me Chipotle. I'm not sure, even though I like BJ's, I'm not so sure that I see that as a good long-term business, even as people do go back out to eat. But Max, your thoughts? Are people going to eat at home more, or are they going to flood the restaurants?
Oh, they're going to go out to restaurants and be pigs for sure. At least it's like where I live, though. I live in a city, and it's like the cool hip thing to go to like the local scenes, not the big chains necessarily. Is that a big impact to you?
So yes and no. West Palm Beach has a mix of both. There's not a lot of like one-off local restaurants, except for very nice ones. There's a lot of like, let's call them regional chains where they have maybe like 6 or 8 or even like 20 or 30. And I do think there's some preference for people to go to those, but there's also a lot of tourism here. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people that, it's like I could go to the hip downtown restaurant, but it's Tuesday night. I'm just gonna get Buffalo Wild Wings and eat in Orlando, where we have our second place, or Davenport, Florida, to be technical, bordering on Kissimmee. It's hard to find a local restaurant. It is a land of chains and hotel restaurants, and you can find some good hotel restaurants, which is actually pretty rare. But again, I think there's going to be a comeback. I don't think you can make any investing decisions based on the next 12 months of data, because the pent-up demand, the pent-up savings, all the stimulus money, an awful lot of people want to go out. And I've told this story on air, my son and I went to an On the Border, which I don't think is part of a publicly traded chain, but I'm not sure. And the restaurant was empty, and they told us it was 20 minutes to sit. And that's because they didn't have enough waitresses or waiters or servers or whatever you're supposed to call them these days. That, I think, is going to make it look like there's going to be a lot of factors making these industries look more successful than they are. So if you weren't going to buy shares in, Restaurant Brands International or Dine Equity or whatever it is before the pandemic, I'd be very wary of buying them now. We'd love your questions, your comments, your thoughts about the reopening. It is a very quiet audience out there. Max, I'll throw out this one, and I can have the answer. Theme parks. I think theme parks are going to be incredibly resurgent because on a local level, say a Six Flags is very, very affordable. And on a national level, which really means your Walt Disney Worlds, your Disneyland, SeaWorld, and Universal Studios, I think the pent-up vacation demand is very high. But again, I was at Disney and it was crowded, but it's not at full capacity. They are selling out their Halloween extra ticket event at Disney. I'm sure Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios will do well, but we don't know what the capacities look like. We don't know when they get back to full. Legally, they could be at full. The reason they're not at full is if you went to Disney World and all of the big ticket theatrical productions and sing-alongs and other things, and stunt shows and other things that just eat up crowds, if those aren't happening, the park won't operate. It would be like a 4-hour line for everything. I mean, I waited in a 45-minute line at Starbucks. So that is a problem. I wish someone had just told me there was a coffee kiosk like 2 minutes away that had no line. So I think theme parks are going to have a huge bounce back year, but the actual revenue being better is probably going to be starting the holiday season when we're fully open, when the flights are in place. The other big barrier we have, and I don't think this hurts Disney as much, but it definitely hurts Universal Studios and SeaWorld. Rental cars are crazy expensive for reasons we've talked about. There's a shortage of them. So, are there investable plays here? Like, yeah, I think I've made it no secret that Disney is one of my favorite companies, and Comcast is one of my least favorite. Comcast owns Universal Studios. Both Six Flags and SeaWorld are publicly traded companies. I'd be very, very wary. Those were not well-run. I don't want to say not well-run companies. The actual business of those places was not well-run. Like, maybe their corporate's great, but their in-park experience is not. Max,
do they still have like higher expenses for any like health mitigation things, or no? Is that
so? My guess is that's almost entirely gone away. I don't know. They might be providing masks for staff. That can't be that significant an expense at a place that already provides uniforms. There's extra cleaning, so there's definitely that. But there's also lessened cleaning. I stayed in a hotel for a few days, and they don't do maid service unless you specifically request it. I think if you say a certain length, they come in. I know at other places I've stayed during the pandemic, they bring you like a new bundle of towels, but they don't come in and take the old ones. I guess you could leave the old ones outside. So yeah, the results are going to be hinky. And I think that's going to be true for the next ones here. Max, when was the last time you went to a movie in a theater?
It's been a while, obviously, but I don't know. I couldn't even tell you the last movie I saw. Maybe, honestly, I think it was like Godzilla like 6 years ago.
So Max, not a big movie guy before this. I am a big movie guy. And I'm going to go, Black Widow will be my first movie back in a theater. I'll go see it with my son in a couple of weeks. My wife has gone to see, they went to see A Quiet Place 2. I Am Afraid of Things, so I didn't see that. Movie theaters aren't coming back. For people who worry about this as an investment, this isn't an investment. Why? Because small movies play better at home. Netflix is paying big money for certain movies, and those movies might play on 2 or 3 screens for Oscar eligibility. But just a lot of the movies we used to go see in theaters simply aren't going to come out in theaters. If you're making a movie that you're going to make for $10-20 million, and Netflix will guarantee you a profit on it and an audience, that makes a lot more sense than these expensive, slow releases. So for the most part, I think the art house is dead. I think we're going to have a lot more movies, but we're probably also going to have a lot more bad movies, a lot more very expensive prestige movies that, I didn't watch The Irishman because I can't imagine sitting through it. But I think you are going to have some of these auteurs get paid money to make things that maybe just aren't that good. And I'm not commenting on that specific movie. I didn't see it. But I don't think there's a path back for movie theaters. And separating AMC out as a meme stock, I get all the things you could do. Sure, you can show UFC fights. You can rent out space to colleges. You can have stand-up comedy or live events or whatever it is. Those are going to be very niche things. If I was investing in the movie space, I don't think there is no publicly traded company, but I'd be looking at some of the eat-in theaters and some of the experiential theaters, especially if their experience is good enough that you'd go to them without a movie. That's an argument I make about Dave & Buster's all the time. This should be good enough that I want to eat here when I'm not going to play video games or there's not a football game I want to watch. And I challenge any person to say that the food there is. It is not, not passable, which is a problem. So, Max, let's jump ahead here. Healthcare alternatives. When I say that, that's a pretty broad thing, but I think we've all become pretty comfortable with everything from delivered prescriptions to telemedicine to remote monitoring of some of our health, whether it be via app or via other things. Where do you think that's going to go as an investable space?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not a space I follow very closely, but to me, I mean, I feel like some of that's still relatively limited. You're much more of a fan or like more optimistic on the outlook of telemedicine, I think, than I am. I just feel like there's only so much you can do. You can't like take someone's blood pressure or anything.
So I think a hybrid telemedicine model is going to be where we're going. But honestly, if you ask me where to invest, I'd probably tell you Apple. Because look, there's a lot of things we've talked about on shows that it's not plausible for your Apple Watch to be a medical device. It's absolutely plausible for there to be a blood pressure cuff or for your watch to take your blood pressure at some point. But I don't think, look, you can't have a pure telemedicine appointment. I could tell my doctor I weigh 170, now I'm 5'10". Neither of those things are true, and he wouldn't necessarily be able to verify. But I do think you're going to see more the model of your appointment with the doctor is after you've had blood work run at a neighborhood lab. That's how it works for our doctors here. You don't get your blood drawn at your physical. You get your blood drawn, a few days before or a few days after. They take your height and weight, but it's not the doctor who takes your height and weight. It's a nurse. So I think you are going to see more like dispatched nurses that come and, for now, maybe take your blood pressure and things like that. But going forward, when everyone who owns an Apple Watch can track their blood pressure for 6 months, that's going to be a much more meaningful device than Dan going to the doctor, having white coat syndrome and having his blood pressure be high, and then having to go, sit in the CVS afterwards to calm himself down and show readings that it isn't. And doctors are aware of that, and there's things they can check for and techniques they can use, but there's a lot. So yeah, I am confident in that space. I am not necessarily confident that any of the pure medical companies in that space are necessarily going to make it worth. We're going to take a couple of comments here. We will take the second comment from Kevin Eckmark, if you want to share that one. Wasn't a big believer in telehealth until I bought my first Apple Watch 2 weeks ago. Max, you don't wear any sort of fitness device, do you?
Nope. I have no, I don't, no fitness devices for me.
Yeah, so I do. I'm older than you. I use my fitness device as an accountability device. And my goal is to move enough every day to close up the rings. I haven't done any of that today, but I will this afternoon, take a 2 or 3 mile walk at a pretty aggressive pace. And I will show my trainer when I meet with my trainer 2 or 3 times a week. Yep, here's when I did it. The only days I don't do that is the days I see my trainer. Because I will say the one thing Apple is really bad at is keeping track of actual weightlifting exercise. So I do an hour of lifting weights at a pretty high cardio pace with my trainer, and it might credit me 180 calories. And I'm dripping sweat because the air conditioning is right now broken at half of our gym. So on those days, I know I put a hard hour in. I'm not worried necessarily about it. But I use this to know, and I'll go, okay, I'm going to be in the car all day today. Is there a time I can fit in a walk in the morning? Or, am I going to have to double down and hit the gym the next day instead of just doing something cardiovascular? I think it's an amazing thing for that. I think there can also be some paralysis by analysis in that I know my blood pressure at all times. And until I realized that like eating causes not your blood pressure, your heartbeat, that eating just causes you to go up 10, 20 points. I had to look that up to know that was normal, to see these things. Or if you see something shocking or surprising, or sometimes just turn too fast, you might go from 65 beats a minute to 95 beats a minute. Until I got used to that rhythm, I maybe spent a little bit more time worried about it than I should have. So Max, at your age, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's interesting. First you said, it's like more of an accountability device, and that's actually really interesting insight. There actually are studies that, people who track their weight or their workouts or their run or whatever, right? Maybe of a spreadsheet, maybe of an app, they are more consistent. So that can form healthier habits over time. So just that, it's kind of more of like a tangent, but that's a pretty big opportunity, I would think. And then go ahead.
So I think there's something I've learned from, let's call it productivity trading. I worked, a friend of mine, Mike Schultz, just put out a book called Not Today. It's a productivity book. It's also about the very tragic passing of his son and how sort of being in the hospital forced him to sort of figure out how to be as productive as possible because he had to keep his business afloat because he needed health insurance because his son was going through some terrible things. Search that book out. I'll share the link on Amazon. Very proud to be a small part of it and to have been part of their story. But when I worked on some of the editing of that book, I went, wait, I do these things at work. These are my tasks for the day. I'm going to do the one I least want to do first. These are the deadlines I have. These are the things that if I clear them off my plate, I don't have to work Friday afternoon. Like that's how I always worked. It wasn't how I approached fitness. I always approached fitness as sort of this is what you're supposed to do. And it's really easy to make excuses to not do them. So now I sort of act like my watch is my boss and and if I don't tick that off. Now, look, are there days where you're just not going to do it? Sure. The day I drove 12 hours to North Carolina, I couldn't do it. But most of the time, I'd say 6 days out of 7, 7 days out of 7, I'm accountable. And it makes you think about every choice you make. I was talking to my trainer because I am going on this cruise. And this works for investing too, by the way. Like having a diligent, like, yep, every 2 weeks I'm putting money in. I'm going to buy, you know, my highest conviction, or I'm going to take a 7 investing recommendation, whatever it is. Having a method to your madness makes sense. And then you can make exceptions. So with investing, I might make an exception. If a stock I really love gets cut in half for some dumb reason, and I still really believe in the stock, I might take some money out of my account and speed up my investment. The same happens with exercise. Like, you know, I might say, okay, I know tomorrow is going to be bad. The third Friday of every month, we are on camera from like 10 in the morning until like 6 o'clock at night. And at 6 o'clock at night, all I want to do is like eat comfort food. I don't want to go work. So I make sure that Saturday is a trainer day for me, that Thursday before was a heavy workout for me. I think that there's a lot of things you can do there. And yeah, I think tools like this help. You know, I don't use my Apple Watch for anything else. Like, I don't play music. I use it to pay at a couple of places. You can pull up a barcode. I want to take one last comment from Mike Fee. Max, if you could read this one. This is a little bit much for me to read.
Oh, you're giving me a whole paragraph to read. What is this?
It is.
In a contrarian sort of way, higher inflation was seen as a tailwind for the travel industry. However, the 10-year Treasury is currently at 1.47%, down from a high of over 1.7% 3 months ago. The reopening trade might still be alive and well. We will have a strong 2021, but profitability expectations might be muted. What do you think?
So I don't worry about inflation at all at the moment, because I don't think we know what inflation is. The fact that I used to be able to fly from here to Baltimore for $140 round trip, and now it's 220, isn't inflation. It's not having enough pilots and not enough people working, and not sure what the demand is and when to roll back out. The fact that certain items cost more isn't inflation. And there might be some actual inflation, but right now we're living in a demand-based economy. And basically within a few months, we all went from, hey, I'm at home and I'm ordering food, to, oh my God, I want to go out to eat. I want to go to the movies. I want to go do this, and get me to the theme park, get me to the water park. The water park near our place in Davenport was never busy during the week, even during the height of tourist season. It's a smaller park. There's certainly better water parks in the area. And now it's busy every day, because I'm guessing even locals are just hungry to do things, and they can't get reservations at Disney and other places. So I essentially say throw out 2021. And this is going to be the year that you really have to evaluate companies on a long-term basis. Now, that's what we do anyway. We don't go, oh, hey, the price of gas might be high, so you know that's going to cause fewer people to go to restaurants, so we're not going to invest in restaurants. Like we look at the much longer trends, but the news media, and again, I am a 29-year professional journalist. So I've been doing this in some fashion since I was 18, 19 years old. Professional journalists, for the most part, don't know how to cover the market. They don't know how to cover earnings reports. They don't know what to look for. So you're going to get a lot of people who are just talking about comps and same-store sales, when maybe those same-store sales were through the roof this quarter this year, because all of a sudden everybody needed new tennis rackets or new whatever to go out and play. You really have to look at profitability next year, and customer counts and average revenue per user, and things that aren't in the press release on the first page. So as investors, think long term. We appreciate so many of you playing along. We know that it was a bit of a helter-skelter show. There was not a ton of news worth talking about today. On Friday, we are going to do 5 steps to financial freedom in honor of the 4th of July. Anirban Mahante from Australia will be, of course, wearing his American flag outfit. And Sam Bailey, there will be fireworks. I'm not sure how we're going to pull that off, but start talking to Simon Erickson about budgets. With that, it is time to hit our finisher. Which form of entertainment will have the strongest post-pandemic comeback? About 30% said concerts. Most of you agree with me on movies and said nope. 14.1% said theme parks. 49.9% said sporting events. Max, I'm confident in 3 of these. I think the demand for concerts is going to be incredible. I think the number of A-list artists that will be out over the next 2 years is going to be intense, and there simply aren't enough venues. Like, you're going to have multiple stadium artists touring in the same year. Sporting events, I think we're struggling a little before this. And I think aside, it's very market based. I don't think all of a sudden the Miami Marlins are going to be selling out. Whereas like, of course the Pittsburgh Steelers will sell out, but the Pirates, what do the Pirates sell? 200 tickets a game? I mean, I'm kidding a little bit, but like, it's like the Marlins. They're not good. They don't have an active fan base. But I think the one where people are missing here is theme parks. I think families were stuck home for a very long time. There were a lot of canceled planned vacations where people already have money in. I think you're seeing this in the cruise industry, that a lot of the cruise lines allowed you to take 125% credit. Doesn't work out to that because prices are generally higher heading into next year, but they're taking that credit. Well, a lot of people had canceled airline tickets and canceled Disney vacations. And in my case, I don't know, like 30 canceled business trips. And all that money is sitting in my various accounts, my Southwest account, and I think that is going to be a major boon for theme parks. And I also think this is lining up really nicely with a lot of new things opening. It's the 50th anniversary at Disney. You're going to see new rides open at every park. You still have a very new Star Wars land, both here in Florida and in California. So I actually think that's the sneaky one here. Max, I know this isn't your area, but any thoughts you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, so I voted for sporting events. I agree with you. It's going to be region-based or maybe even like based on the sport leagues, But like this fall and winter for the NFL, I think it's going to be really, really something like pretty incredible. Like, what else are people going to do in the winter and the fall? Like right now, you have options in the summer, would dwindle away a little bit. And as an aside, the joke here in Pittsburgh, in the very beginning, when the Pirates were opening up the stadium again for the first time, they came out and said, hey, we're going to have 25% capacity to start opening the stadium. And everyone said, oh, okay, so they're at full capacity. Because they don't sell. You're right. They might only have 200 tickets a game. And then, so after sporting events, I said concerts. I think that's going to be big. And I'm younger. And so
here's the thing. I'm a big concert guy. I've sought out live music wherever possible during the pandemic. And I am very eager. One of the first things canceled in March, I had Gaslight Anthem tickets, a show that I was actually going to DC to see it at a very famous venue that I'd never been in. A lot of the bands I'm big fans of are smaller. They don't necessarily work full time. It's going to be really exciting to see them hit the road. For me, so I'm going to a live quasi-sporting event in a couple weeks. My son wanted to go see the AEW wrestling show, and I am a wrestling fan. I was at the first AEW show with our friend Nick Seipel. And it's in Miami. It's in a 4,500 seat venue, and they're coming up against the problem of that when they put tickets on sale, this is their first on the road show. When they put tickets on sale, it was set up for 50% capacity. It's now full capacity, but people sort of don't realize tickets are still on sale. So I think you're going to see a lot of hinkiness, a lot of like the rules change as we go along in some of these places. I was shocked that there were ever rules in Florida, but I'm guessing that was maybe a city of Miami thing and not a state of Florida. But as much as a 47-year-old man, it's not that often I'm going to go out to see pro wrestling. I'm kind of excited for things I wouldn't be excited for. Like I want to see people sing along to entrance music and chant and just be normal. Like I 100% guarantee you that next year when I fly to New York to see a Rangers game, that I will cry. That is a 100% possibility. My college roommates had season tickets since college. I've sat with the same people. I'm very, very eager to get to see that. But I do think it's going to be a whole new world. But I do wonder if the live sporting experience is something that some of us are over. I know that in the year my brother was in Miami with the Dolphins, when I basically had to go to every game of a team I didn't care about because he had 4 tickets and no friends who didn't work for the team because he was new to the city. But I didn't literally have to go. But the first few games I absolutely did. The experience of parking and getting to my car and getting home. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not going to Monday Night Football ever again if you were playing. Like they could give me a prize and I wouldn't be going because I got home at like 3:30 in the morning. But with that being said, we are very excited for the new world. I will shoot some footage while I am away in the Bahamas this weekend, and we will certainly be doing some live shows from some very strange locations. Not strange, but very different locations in the coming 6 months. Max and I will be 6 days all over the world in February, and we'll be at various islands, which basically means we'll be doing shows from coffee shops or Margaritavilles. But that being said, because there isn't Wi-Fi in like picturesque waterfalls and other places we could be. With that, if you'd like to get in touch with us, that is info@7investing.com. That is for questions about your membership, questions about pricing, questions about how it works. Don't ask us to work up an individual stock, but if there's a stock we've talked about or you are a member and you have a question, feel free. And if you'd like to interact with us on social media, we are at 7investing. It's a holiday week. We appreciate you watching. For Maxx Chatsko, for Sam Bailey, I am Dan Kline. We will see you Wednesday.